for joining us today. My name is Greg Miller. I'm the director of the Center for Land Economics, co-founder with Lars Doucet, who's also on this call. And we're here with Stephen Hoskins, who is going to get us started. We appreciate you all joining.
Yes, well, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Good morning to a former colleague of mine, Professor Pang Sok Yong, who I think is calling from Singapore. Glad to have you all here with us. Thanks for spending time with us. I'm Steve Hoskins from the Progress and Poverty Institute, where I work as the Director for Community Research and Engagement. I'm just going to give a little bit of an intro to today's event, provide some admin, and then yeah, you heard plenty from Greg and I at the previous of these LVT Landscape live events. So hopefully I won't be doing too much talking tonight. Just admin-wise, just be aware that the meeting is being recorded and will be being posted online early next week. Because of that, we'd ask you to stay unmuted, stay muted for the entirety of the event. Unless we kind of open up a general Q&A at the end, but unless you hear from us, please stay muted. You can put your questions in the chat as the event goes on, and I'll be collecting those and fielding them to our esteemed guests, as the event goes on. And yeah, we'll follow up with an email next week with any materials from this webinar, with the video link and any of the kind of follow-up sort of contact information you might need. Just to give a sort of couple of quick updates from the Progress and Poverty Institute side of things, Greg's going to show you a lot of the amazing materials that CLE have been working on at the end of the event. But from our side, we've sort of been reshaping a little bit of our grant program this year to be a bit more heavily focused on LVT. You're going to hear about a couple of those in a moment, but a great example is that Nathan Seegert is going to extend his implicit land tax modeling to do a kind of LVT shift modeling on, I think it's about 2/3 of counties across the US. So that's very exciting. Russell Ritchie joined us a couple of months ago as Director of Strategy and Impact, and he's been very prolifically driving forward networking and grant-funded applications for us. Been really great to have him on board. And we've been sort of at a couple of conferences and have a big conference program rolling out for the rest of the year. National Tax Association, IAAO, Yimby Town in particular, we're going to have a big presence at, and so hoping to meet with many of you in person as well. And so just to sort of take you from where we left off at the last of the LVT Landscape Lives, the main narrative we were really trying to drill home there was that LVT return, or land value return, LVT, is needed, it's pragmatic, and it's achievable. And what we mean by that is, America has record numbers of Americans that are rent burdened right now, an absolute dearth or shortage of housing in the places where it's needed most. So it's very much needed, and sort of rising wealth inequality as well, a lot of it driven by land. It's pragmatic insofar as we're seeing very high interest levels of interest in LVT at the moment. That's a combination of the problems I just outlined, as well as sort of local communities sort of fearing the retreat of the federal government from support and looking for more local sources of funding to fund municipal and state services. And then achievable, which is really what we're going to be highlighting today, insofar as we're seeing a lot of legislation on the table for enabling LVT, a lot of burgeoning interest in actually implementing it, and some great wins on the table. So that's going to be who we're hearing from tonight. And just to kind of take you through what that looks like, US wide, this map is highlighting sort of all of the states where there's active legislation, or there has been in the last couple of years, or we know it's kind of about to come down the pike. The green ones are ones where there have been, wins, and we've got people coming from those two places tonight. So just to talk you through a couple of the specifics there, Illinois, Dreg Warren, who was one of the speakers at our previous event, he won his primary, and so is kind of the presumptive, was it there, council member for Cook County, and he spoke at an event that we hosted in Chicago last month. Which was great fun. We had an urbanist comic with the line that cyclists are the anarchists of the urbanist movement. And Drake is, I believe, going to be pushing for a vacancy tax or underutilization tax in Cook County, which is mostly a function of the constitutional constraints there. Some other ones to highlight. Well, Virginia, you're going to hear from Lyle Solla-Yates in a moment about the legislative win there. But some other things, we've funded Joe Gelbach and Angela Tianco from YIMBY Action to be studying LVT shifts in Virginia. And looking at policy design to kind of aid with implementation. And PBI and CLA are about to start kind of regular monthly check-ins with the on-the-ground advocates there to sort of get work moving in Virginia. Maine, Greg and I and Lars have been serving as the analysts for the task force there. I would sort of frame a lot of our work as kind of helping defend the integrity of the property tax system from sort of fiddling around the edges that can erode the efficiency of it. Maryland is one to highlight where there's been 150,000 allocated for studying LVT land value capture within a half mile of transit there. And then in Washington State, which is actually where I reside, well, there's certainly a lot of interest from Spokane and Seattle's mayor in implementing LVT, and we're hoping that'll come down the line during the next legislative session. But we have just signed a contract supported by the Sightline Institute to do LVT message testing there, sort of finding ways to package it up in ways that are tractable and understandable and appealing to local voters in the state of Washington. And I won't say much more about, well, a couple of the green and bolded ones there, New York, Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky, because that's where our esteemed guests are from. So with that, I'll hand you over to Greg, and he's going to take us through the rest of the event.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think that's helpful context just to lay the groundwork. We have on the Progress and Poverty Substack, progressandpoverty.substack.com, the last event that we hosted back in December, which lays out the reasons why we think land value tax is having a moment right now. But we talked a lot last time, so we're really excited about this panel. This is a really strong panel of folks that you'll hear from over the course of the next 40 minutes. We'll start off with Senator Blessing, who's going to talk about his work pushing LVT, and in typical fashion, he is at a fundraiser for a colleague of his, not his own fundraiser, but he is calling in from just outside of that. We'll hear from two people who have helped pass legislation on the ground, and then we'll hear from Reed, who's really pushing innovative work around land value capture around transit corridors in New York City. If you follow this movement, you might have saw his report released last week on the IBX corridor in New York State, which we'll hear about more. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Senator Blessing.
Yeah, hi. Can you guys hear me okay? I presume so. Yes? No? Can you hear me?
Coming through loud and clear.
All right,
You're
very
all
good.
good.
Okay. So, yes, as Greg has pointed out, I'm actually, it's not a colleague per se, it's a former colleague in the former Senate President, now Speaker of the House, Matt Huffman, his fundraiser, and I'm a couple blocks down from that. But that said, I'm glad that we are, partially talking about the property tax revolt. And as you may or may not know, in Ohio, we have a potential ballot issue. Now, they haven't gotten the signatures yet, but they have until July to get a total property tax abolition amendment on the ballot. And so, this isn't like some of these other proposals like Prop 13 in California or others that might freeze property taxes when you purchase the property. This is a full-blown property taxes won't exist anymore in Ohio proposal. And, it is hard for me sometimes to put in words just how catastrophically bad this idea is. And, I've had, quite a bit of success actually going around and telling people the damage that this would do. But, for starters, Ohio at the local level, which is what the property tax system funds, mainly local governments like townships, cities, villages, counties, and really, for the most part, school districts, to the tune of $24 billion with a B every fiscal year. To wipe that out would mean that in Ohio, we would have to essentially double our sales tax. Was my wife calling in if I cut out for a minute? Have to double the sales tax. We'd have to more than double the income tax. We'd have to look under every couch cushion, whether that's commercial activities tax, financial institution tax, increasing sin taxes, you name it. We would be struggling to find the money to simply fill that hole. But, as I'm sure you've seen on TV, but wait, there's more. what is lost in all of this is these folks think, well, that's the end of it. We'll find a way to fund it. And I have warned them repeatedly, if you do this, you will have the exact situation that Winston Churchill warned about, that Henry George warned about, that many economists have warned about, and that would be land hoarding, to the point where I joke with my wife. I'm like, well, if this were to pass, I'm immediately buying, 30, 40 acres in my home county because I can sit on it tax-free forever, thereby making land even more scarce in Ohio, which is obviously, as you know, the key issue. It will drive up real estate prices unbelievably so because you can sit on that and land hoard without any penalty whatsoever, and it'll slow economic development down to a halt as everybody has to pay these land hoarding middlemen. Beyond that, for all these seniors that think that they're going to make out so well with it, I'm like, well, if real estate prices skyrocket, as I suspect that they would, because property taxes, believe it or not, actually can make housing more affordable, given its efficiency as a funding mechanism, but insurance prices will go through the roof, as they have in Florida. And not that saying that Florida has obviously gotten rid of property taxes, they haven't, but DeSantis has a proposal to really cut back on it. But those insurance rates are going to go through the roof. And so really the net effect is that we're going to have a lot less housing, which we really cannot afford in Ohio because we're about 1 million units short, depending on the study you look at. Obviously the insurance rates will come up. If you are a younger person trying to start a family, you are just doubly, triply, quadruply screwed in the sense that, okay, you may not be paying property taxes, but your mortgage is going to be through the roof. Your insurance is going to be through the roof. Your income taxes are going to be through the roof. Your sales taxes are going to be through the roof. And you're going to get nickeled and dimed literally everywhere else, to the point where it'll have catastrophic economic damages, to the point where I've argued that it's kind of like a meteor hitting Ohio. It's an extinction level event for the state. But, when people say, well, what would we put on the ballot, to combat this? And my response is, well, don't threaten me with a good time. I would put SJR 7, which is my constitutional amendment to allow land value taxes in Ohio. And I sit here and I hear some of these folks that are going to be speaking after me that have the ability to do this reform today. And I'm like, my God, you guys are already out there running the race. And we in Ohio, it's like we're still in bed waiting to put on the clothes for the race now because of that constitutional prohibition on it. But I can tell you that we have seen a lot of my colleagues are interested in this idea. And I will tell folks, look, I'm a Republican. I get that this is a progressive idea, although it's classical progressivism, not what I try to tell my colleagues. Like, don't think that this is, something that would be, caught up with social issues and things like that. It's simply saying you're not paying taxes on the improvements. You guys recognize that when you don't pay taxes on improvements, you get more of them, and that this is a much more efficient tax. It is the most efficient tax. And we're leaving our best player on the bench because of this constitutional prohibition. And that has worked really well with them. They understand that. Now, the hangup has been, they're like, well, okay, let's do that, but let's also offset it with property tax cuts and income tax cuts and make people go to the ballot to pass these things. And I'm like, well, I get your point, but I think that local governments, and I have SJR 7 structured this way, if you're not forcing local governments to send this stuff to the ballot, the simple proposition that they can do these by majority vote versus sending property taxes, income taxes, you name it, they have to send that to the ballot today. I think they organically shift to the land value tax and leave the other taxes alone, simply because, hey, if you got to go to the ballot for this, why bother? And the net effect would be, at least I should say in theory, more economic prosperity, because they're moving away from more punitive taxes to a more efficient tax system. So this has actually worked, I think, really well. There have been Republican members coming out of the woodwork for this. in both the Senate and the House that are like, hey, we want to do companion legislation. The issue is that with our big property tax fight, not just at the ballot, but after a lot of what we passed back in December, I think there's some fatigue with real estate taxes generally. But I am very hopeful for this going forward. And from my perspective, I think a lot of time can be invested in Ohio on this. And look, if I'm ultimately unsuccessful making my case on this, the polling on land value taxes can get a little weird. But I think we're at a point where reform might actually work on this. And Ohio is one of those states where if push came to shove, we could take something like this to the ballot. You can gather the signatures and do it. I don't know that you're going to get opposition the way that we would on certain other things. I'm pretty convinced, based on my research, that progressives come out for it. I think conservatives come out for it. I had a local woman that was complaining to me that, my God, I bought this house and fixed it up, and my property taxes, went through the roof when we went through our next valuation cycle. And I'm like, guess what would not happen with a land value tax? Exactly what you went through. It would have stayed flat. Or if it went up, it was because the locals voted for it. So, guys, I'm telling you, even though Ohio, we have to get through the constitutional issue, there's a lot of good energy here. There are a lot of good folks in the business community, in the conservative world, and in the progressive world that want to do this. And though I know it's really not gotten a lot of traction lately, it's not because of the idea itself. It's more due to logistics and other pressing issues with the General Assembly. So that's my TED Talk. I'm looking at the time. I want to say I got 10 minutes there in. So I'll yield my time to the other speakers.
You did great. You landed on 10 minutes almost exactly. And for those of you who haven't, you should go online and Google Senator Blessing's many interviews on this issue. There's obviously an abolish property tax movement. Florida just had a 3-day emergency session this week on abolishing property taxes. And so reframing this in terms of abolishing building taxes to encourage development. This is, we're about to hear from somebody in a Republican state where Republicans passed legislation. So when we talk about bipartisan, this is truly bipartisan. And I love what Senator Blessing said there. It's like we're leaving our best player on the bench. Every economist agrees that land value tax is the best tax, including Milton Friedman. So why are we leaving our best player on the bench? And so with that said, we are working with Senator Blessing on modeling for Cincinnati for an LVT and trying to get more momentum and more data analysis there. And so now we'll kick it over to a local advocate on the ground, not elected, but working directly with electeds, who is able to pass legislation in the state of Kentucky. And so I'll pass it over to Jackson to introduce himself and what he's been up to and how he has helped pass legislation in Kentucky in the span of 6 months. Pretty impressive.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jackson Arnold. I am a citizen member of the Abundance Network here in Louisville, Kentucky. The Abundance Network, for context, is a national organization made up of members who are elected, donors, or citizens like me that kind of work together to get abundance-related policies, off the ground in states and cities across the country. So I joined this network about May of last year and immediately was connected with another member here in Louisville, Kentucky, is a councilman for Louisville, Councilman Ben Reno Weber. And from the get-go, we tried to figure out a project we could work on together where I could do the heavy lifting of the analysis of data and policy, and then he could go and fight for it politically once I've got the evidence to prove it. And the first thing we kind of settled on was trying to, work on vacant abandoned properties. And so what I did was then go around Louisville Metro government and I tried to figure out what to do with vacant abandoned properties. And eventually I kind of knew about the land value tax as a concept and also knew it was illegal in the state of Kentucky. But I eventually came to the conclusion that one of the big policy pushes we needed to do was try to get us a land value tax of some sort activated here in Louisville, Kentucky. So today I'm going to talk about how we did that, what I conceptualize, land value tax and abundance, or the Georgism movement and abundance movement, to, working together, And for those who don't know, abundance is a burgeoning kind of national movement that's about like how do we build more things and reach material abundance for everybody in this country, and housing, energy, transportation, and all that. And I think an LVT narrows that, or hits most of those pretty much square. So I'll get more into that in a second, and then I'm going to talk about some of the tips I have for how we enacted this, or how you can repeat what I did in your own local cities and states, and also get property taxes or get a LVT enabled. So here, Greg has shown a map here of Louisville, Kentucky, specifically Jefferson County, Kentucky, on the screen. For context, Louisville is a combined city-county government, so Louisville and Jefferson County are the same, are governed by the same jurisdiction, basically. And so the councilman I work for is part of a 26-member Metro Council, who's made up of both, has a Democratic majority and a Republican minority. So after I kind of got the evidence together to show that LVT was could be a valuable tool and Louisville's toolbox to help deal with our vacant abandoned property problem, because like most Midwestern cities, we have a lot of vacant abandoned properties in our inner city, particularly our historically redlined areas. And then I did a quick preliminary legal and data analysis to both figure out what an implementation of this might look like here in Louisville, and also what we actually needed to do to get it to pass. And on the legal side, I won't get into too much detail of our legal standing because it's kind of complicated. But basically, constitutionally, we are allowed to do a split rate tax, but not a full land value tax. So we still have to have some tax on the buildings, and we need the local legislature to approve it, enable us to do it, more or less. So I went to Councilman Reno Weber with these facts, and he was very excited because he also realized it would have a big impact on another one of his pet problems, which is downtown parking lots, which we also have a lot of here in Louisville. And I went back to keep refining my legal and data analysis to make it more presentable, and he started talking to the other council members that he works with to try to get some traction amongst the broader council. So the first person he kind of found was Councilman Andrew Owen, who has actually found this policy relatively recently. At the same time I was pitching it to Councilman Reno Weber, and he was interested in it for the same reasons that we all were. So I went and told him the situation, and he said, "Yep, that sounds good." And then he went and connected me with Councilman Anthony Piagentini, who is the chair of the Republican minority on Metro Council. And for those who don't know, Kentucky is quite a red state despite our Democratic governor, and that means we have a Republican supermajority legislature, which holds all the power in the state. So if you want anything done, you got to get them on board. And I went and met with Councilman Piagentini to see if he could use his party contacts to get some traction for this at the state. Luck have it, they were already working on a bill to reform the Jefferson County Republicans were already working on a bill to reform the laws that show how, or that dictate how Louisville city government works, which means we could slip a provision right in there. And so I went and I was pushing at the time for a full reform of one of our county property taxes. We have three. We have our Metro property tax, which is for the whole county. That funds the general government. We have our school tax, which is also a countywide thing. And then we also have our USD tax. So here on the map, if you can see the darker blue shaded portion there in the center, that's our urban services district, which is the historic boundaries of the city of Louisville before the merger. And that's where the city provides, trash, pickup, snow removal, that kind of thing, which is not provided elsewhere. And it means we have a different property tax to support those services. And that ended up being pretty much exactly the target district we needed to get the Republicans on board, because they would have been nervous that this would have impacted their voters. But in general, Piagentini was very supportive of the idea, because a lot of his ex-urban voters and his colleagues' ex-urban voters are really tired of all the sprawl going on, of more and more suburban development, causing more and more traffic and disrupting like the big land holdings that they all like in the sides of the county. So they want more development downtown to take pressure off that. Democrats that represent the inner city want more development. So we agreed on a bipartisan deal, basically, me and the three council members, to get this pushed into the state legislature under this Republican-led bill. And the Republican-led bill had a lot of other provisions. It was more or less an omnibus. So we had to. There was pushback from the Democrats on it, on the bill as a whole. But the property tax piece was pretty popular overall. So like Representative Rachel Works here, one of the Democrats that was most against the bill, did make it a point to call out on the floor, I think this should be much narrower scope. There are good provisions being laid out. I appreciate the bill has property taxation changes that I think could be a benefit to Louisville Metro as well. But despite Democratic opposition, it passed the Senate, passed the House, got vetoed by the governor because of those other things, but was pretty instantly the veto was overturned, back in the Senate, back in the House, and as of April, Louisville has the legal permission to implement a split rate property tax in its urban services district. And so that's more or less the story. And we're working now to see how exactly we're going to implement this, because there's more, technical and procedural challenges you have to think about once you actually have the permission to do it. But I think things are looking pretty promising right now, that we have more news on this front in the next couple of years, hopefully on the short end of that timescale. It was a momentous achievement, I think, to get it done in 6 months like we did. To be honest, we were extremely lucky. Like, we're in the right position politically at the city. We're at the right position politically at the state for this to happen. But we're going to take this opportunity and run with it. And I think it's going to do a lot abundance-wise to build more housing here in Louisville and set us up long-term. So not only do we just fix the problem now, because we also have a housing shortage. The mayor has a plan to build 15,000 units. We built 7,000 in the time that he wanted to build that larger number. So we need to work really hard to beat our housing shortages problem. But also, once that's done, the energy kind of drains out of the issue, we'll still have the taxation system that will allow us to keep doing this over time. So to finish off here, because I'm also almost out of time, these are kind of some of the lessons I picked up from this 6-month process. The first one is, if you're trying to do this alone, like I was, or a small group of you, not a larger grassroots movement, but a more elite-driven process, find the most reform-minded elected official you can in your jurisdiction, and really kind of stick to them, and let that be your voice in the whatever government you need to do to pass this. Preferably to local legislature specifically, because then they don't typically have very large staffs at all. So you have the ability to be a resource to them that they can't normally get if you're willing to volunteer your time and expertise to a project like this. Be polite but persistent. That's pretty obvious, because if you take anything personally here, there's a very busy people and they're going to say no to you a lot or just ghost you. But if you keep at it and you don't get discouraged, eventually you'll probably find a break somewhere. You want to connect LVT to their priorities, because this, elected officials' priorities, because this is how you get them to care about it and also champion it on your behalf, rather than just a milquetoast. That sounds cool. And then even more, you want to try to work on their interests as well to build up that goodwill, that you're not just some single-minded LVT crazed individual. You care more about reform, and you care about the reforms that they care about, so they'll more likely care about the reforms you care about, which will probably be LVT. And then also be flexible in implementation. We just need to get wins on the board here. Anyone counts, as small as possible. If you go back to the map that we showed earlier, it says, the legal district that the area that's now legalized for LVT is a tiny, tiny proportion of the entire state's area, but it's also one of the most impactful ones because it's where most of the land value is. So I just give in where you have to give in, but make sure you keep the core of the policy alive if you want to make this happen. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Greg, and Lars and Steve for hosting it.
Well, thank you, Jackson, for leading a successful movement. I think when he says he got incredibly lucky, he found the right political opportunity. And so these tips are really insightful here because he didn't just get incredibly lucky. He was able to partner with the right people and find the right political opportunity by being flexible. And so I think that's one thing everybody can take away in politics is just be normal, just be approachable and be helpful, right? And then you can find the opportunity. The opportunity is not always going to come, and a lot of folks on this call will know that they've been working on this for decades. And so, I think that there's work to be done, but it's not just luck. And then you also mentioned about implementation mattering. Lyle knows this all too well, being in Charlottesville, working for the city government. So it's a natural transition point, but also being somebody who has helped lead the movement towards successful implementation of enablement legislation or enabling legislation in Virginia, which passed a couple of months ago or maybe a month ago at this point. So I'll kick it over to Lyle to talk a little bit about the experience out in Virginia.
Great. And can we go to next? My name is Lyle Solla-Yates, Planning Commissioner, Charlottesville, Virginia. I also teach zoning at the University of Virginia. Spend a lot of time looking at maps and worrying about them, what they mean, how they could be better. It's hard to get rules right. It's hard to make things better. It takes years. And I've been doing it for many years now, which has been of some help. We completely changed our zoning, new comprehensive plan, new housing plan. We spend $10 million a year on affordable housing, the most of any locality I know of except for Washington, D.C. Kind of a big deal. Next picture. Looks a little bit like this on a nice day. University of Virginia up front. We've got sort of the West Main area, then downtown. That big blob on the right is the hospital, and we've got some beautiful mountains in the background. You might notice, though, not a lot of big buildings, a lot of green, which is lovely, but I wouldn't say call us rich. Next picture. The University of Virginia, which is my main employer, does pull $6 billion a year. So it's a good amount of money. Expectations are high. We compare ourselves to Paris, London, Tokyo. But, we don't have that kind of money. Next slide. We have that kind of money. Millions is good. It's not nothing, but we're not at the level of services that are expected. There's a big difference between our dreams and our abilities, at least in the city of Charlottesville. So we have to make do with what we have. We do spend money. We do make big things happen. What I'm known for in the area is the Charlottesville Plans Tomorrow program, which was the new comprehensive plan, affordable housing plan, and new zoning to allow the kinds of affordable housing we want, which we previously banned. And as part of that, we looked at tax reform, $2 million a year in tax relief, not tax abatement, tax relief. Expensive, $10 million in affordable housing spending. Expensive. Hey, that's $12 million a year. Where's that money coming from? Next. So far, we've spent $59 million. That's really a lot of money. It's actually more money than we expected. It means that we're not doing other things that we want to do. We're putting off park spending. We're putting off school spending, especially. We've got transit spending we want to do. We're not doing it, but we want to. Next. And hey, we're raising taxes to pay for all this stuff that we're doing, and people absolutely hate it. Next. Because our hands are sort of tied. Virginia is what's called a Dillon Rule state, which means localities are only allowed to do what is explicitly granted to us by the legislature, because of that fellow on the right. I don't think he wanted to hurt Charlottesville specifically, but he has hurt Charlottesville specifically. That's him. It's him. So if you want to do anything like, hey, a land value tax, you've got to go to Richmond. You got to go begging, which is what our friends in Roanoke did. It's what our friends in Fairfax did, Richmond. They all went and they went begging. I got interested in this from Roanoke City Councilor Bill Carter, who's pictured there, recently passed, who was the guiding light for the restoration and the revitalization of downtown Roanoke. It's incredible what he's done with his career. And because he was a Georgist, he was a Republican, but he was really a Georgist, trying to make those big things happen. And he got the legislation through, and he got me interested. That's Mayor Nakia Walker from the city of Charlottesville, who ran on equity and fighting displacement, trying to do the right thing with government, which is how we got $2 million a year in tax relief done, which was a big lift. And it meant cutting things that were popular and other people wanted to do. But now it's in place. It's ready to go. And our friends in the nonprofit community created an analysis looking at how a tax shift and LVT would actually work in the city of Charlottesville. And you could go down parcel by parcel. This data is very old now, but at the time, an absolutely vital resource, because we could say, oh, you're worried about this one parcel. Well, I can tell you precisely what it will look like. Absolutely gigantic. Next. One day, Delegate Sally Hudson, there on the left, walks up to me at a giant parking lot. She says, Lyle, you've done so much for the city. It's wonderful. Is there anything I can do to make things better? And I said, oh, land value tax, obviously, of course. That's what you say whenever an elected asks you that question. And she said, sure, I'm an economics professor. I know a little bit about that. That's Joe McNamara on the right, who is a CPA. And together, an economics professor and an accountant walk into the state legislature, and they get absolutely wrecked. So there's a sort of a Republican Democrat kumbaya, but every single time for years and years, go to the committee, and we lost on a party line vote every year. And the party changed. So over that time, Democrats, Republicans, whoever's in power, they're against it. We would just do for years. Absolutely maddening. But hey, an election comes, new faces, new governor, things can change. Things do change. And this is Katrina Carlson, the new delegate. She's not an economist. She's a lawyer. Don't hold that against her. She gave me 5 minutes. Lyle, what can I do? Well, I've got one idea. And she pulled it in. She went forward with it. And actually, it didn't go well. But then we went back and we changed it. We worked with other localities. We combined it, all four separate bills, into one bill to give everyone a chance. And Governor Spanberger, our new governor, signed it. She vetoed a whole lot of other stuff. This is not a guarantee, but this one went through. We now have the power starting in July next month. Very exciting. So this raises questions and opportunities. Today, I met with staff to talk about how to start doing this. Lots of question marks, but I'm very hopeful we will start doing this soon.
Thank you so much, Lyle. And I'll say Lyle has been key in sort of translating these ideas into things that cities care about, but also caring about the administrative priorities and the implementation details. I think one thing you heard from both Lyle and Jackson did a lot of homework. He did a lot of data analysis, a lot of storytelling. And Lyle in this presentation might have surfaced over some of it, but for instance, that tax shift explorer was part of that homework that was needed to do the legislator's job for them, to help them understand this policy, because a lot of our electeds don't have significant staff. Jackson said that's the reason why you should try to find a city elected, because they don't really have a staff. And that's very true. And they have 100 different priorities, and their number one priority every year is just balancing a budget, which they can't do. And so they're trying to do that, let alone think about this idea of a land value tax, which is why our work is so important, and everybody's work on here, and why and how you can sort of push this forward. With that being said, we want to pivot now to something a little bit different from these other presentations, which we have very much appreciated, to people who have successfully passed legislation, to now think about value capture for transit, which I think a lot of people on this call have thought about for decades. Obviously, cities invest significantly into themselves, and how can we get that money out? So I'm going to pass it over to Reed Schwartz, who is an associate fellow at the Institute for Progress and recently published a report on this very concept.
Thanks, Greg. So yeah, as Greg said, my name is Reed Schwartz. I work on infrastructure policy at the Institute for Progress, which is an innovation policy think tank. And I'm going to talk about this report that I wrote for the Niskanen Center with Alex Armlovich, who some of you may know, who's a non-resident senior fellow there. I'm going to talk about a newly reauthorized provision in New York State that could enable literally like billions of dollars in land value taxes to fund transit. So to set the stage, the 2027 budget in New York State includes big plans for capital expansion. Probably the most high profile is the Interborough Express line. It's going to be built between Brooklyn and Queens. This is the city's first end-to-end transit line since I think like the 1930s. But despite the current good feelings between the mayor of New York and the president of the United States, federal funding for transit projects has been somewhat precarious. Fortunately, though, the state budget, just signed by Hochul, has reauthorized Section 119R of the General Municipal Laws, which had expired in April and could lead to an extremely substantial new source of funding for transit. So, in short, uh, actually, so in short, so 119R is a provision that authorizes cities in specifically cities in New York to establish land value tax districts, as well as also just general property tax districts and tax increment financing with the MTA in order to capture some of the value that is spilled off when when the MTA builds new transit. So you can see it explicitly names land value taxation. Greg, could you go to the next slide? So the history of the provision, you're probably familiar with this figure. He fought for land taxation in New York, ran for mayor as an independent, came in an unlikely second place. I'm, of course, talking about Andrew Cuomo, who passed this in 2016. Can you go to the next slide? Again, this is like this provision which has already been passed authorizes New York to establish like a land value tax in order to do value capture. This isn't the first instance of value capture being used to fund projects in New York City. In under Mayor Bloomberg, there was the Hudson Yards development, but which was financed through tax increment financing. So basically, borrowing against the future property tax revenue that the project would generate. But due to like value exactions that have been added since that project, so especially inclusionary zoning and prevailing wage rules, value uplift from just upzoning Brooklyn, like the corridor in Brooklyn and Queens, probably isn't like going to be substantial enough. That uplift isn't going to be substantial enough to fund a like significant amount of new transit infrastructure. But the land value uplift from new transit access, which again is going to connect properties to firms, to other people, to other transit lines, raising their value, that could be really much larger. You go to the next slide. So value capture is also just in general a very well-suited tool for transit funding. It places the costs of infrastructure directly on the greatest beneficiaries, which is the people who live nearby and more importantly own land nearby, not on more poorly targeted sales taxes or even on general fares. It can create kind of a like flywheel effect where revenue raised can fund more transit, which will then generate more value, which can then be captured to fund more transit. It also encourages some level of fiscal discipline as it directly ties costs to benefits. It encourages planners to think about which projects are actually going to generate a return on their investment. And it's pretty well tested even in New York. So New York's original streetcar lines were built in part on private value capture, where developers would build lines going out to like undeveloped farmland, buy up all the undeveloped farmland, and then use the value that was created by this access. Like they would like flip the land after they'd created these lines, like capturing some of that value. So instituting these taxes is basically a way for New York to do this for public benefit. This is also how like the Hong Kong MTR does. They collect some of their revenue. It's somewhat well tested internationally already. So there's a study in 2022 by Arpit Gupta at NYU, which looked at the Second Avenue subway extension, which he found raised nearby land values by $5.5 billion on a cost of $4.5 billion. So this project was famously extraordinarily expensive on a per mile basis, the most expensive project, I believe, in the history of the world on a per mile basis. And it still generated such a huge social return. And some of that was captured by existing property taxes, but about 70% of it, according to his study, will still remain in private hands. The city will ultimately capture only about 30% from the existing property taxes. So the way that we calculated the uplift numbers that we think that the IVX will generate is we took just the multipliers that Gupta had found to existing property tax data, property valuations in New York. And ultimately, we found a range probably somewhere between like $1.5 to $3.5 billion. There's reasons to think that this might be an underestimate, that Gupta's multipliers, which you can see are depending on the corridor, between 5.5% to maybe 8%. Those could be underestimates. You could see higher returns. There is greater development potential in Brooklyn and Queens. And also there's like transit deserts on this line. And so adding like new transit access could be much more substantial than adding like another marginal transit line in New York, in Manhattan, I mean. Uh, and then it could also be an overestimate given how valuable and productive Manhattan land is and how valuable it is to cut off even seconds off hundreds of thousands of commutes every day. Uh, and also to be clear, it is good that some of this value stays in private hands, if for nothing other than political economy reasons. It does help build political support for projects for landlords to know that they're going to see significant uplift in their properties. But it probably doesn't take a $3 billion transfer to landlords to buy support for a new transit line. It seems like some of that should go to paying for the line itself. So the budget that passed last week reauthorized the land value tax, but it still needs to be authorized by the city council and signed into law by the mayor if they want to actually take advantage of it. We're hearing good things though from state government, from the MTA. There's also pretty strong signs that the mayor himself will be on board, given that in 2022, when this was extremely low salience, he gave an interview in Jackman Magazine talking about how great this provision was and how he wanted to expand it and make it better. He also introduced a bill to renew it and to remove the sunset clause that is still attached to it. Right now, it'll expire next year if it's not renewed again, although tax districts that are created will not expire. And so, I think it's very promising. If you want to go to the next slide, you can check out or never mind. You can check out the report. If you just search Niskanen IBX, or I'll put the link in the chat. I mean, yeah, anyway, doesn't really matter. I'll put the link in the chat. You can check out the report. We're very optimistic on it, and Greg will keep you posted as this progresses. Thanks.
Thanks, Reed, and sorry about that. Needed to refresh. Yeah, I think that obviously a very interesting opportunity. Another instance where doing the work and understanding how we can implement a policy like this really matters. And so keep your eyes out for this. There will be more updates coming. This obviously just happened. Reed's report just came out. But I, for one, am excited that we have a mayor who 3 years ago, when nobody was talking about land value capture, land value tax, for some reason was pushing for this. Probably, I think Reed said, like, one of the only times that this random provision has been talked about by Mayor Mamdani, which is quite cool. And so we have run the gambit of different styles of we passed a bill in a Republican in a Democrat state, and then we had a Republican state senator on, and then we have Mayor Mamdani, a socialist, a social democrat, talking about these issues. And so I think it's quite exciting, all the different momentum across lines. Really quick, I want to say something that the Center for Land Economics is doing. One of the tools that we're excited to show you all and release is a new way to model land value tax shifts. As we said, the data always matters. Doing the work always matters. And we are in this new era of AI. And so typically land value tax modeling is a many-step process. You have to find all of the data. You have to go, search your county portal, find the open data. You have to go find the millages that are assessed across all the different tax levies. You have to understand the data and do the data translation. You also then need to model current property taxes. You have to figure out how to account for current exemptions and abatements. And you have to figure out then, how would you model a split rate tax? And once you have those models per parcel, you then need to analyze and visualize that policy impact. And so this is a lot of steps that typically takes a decent amount of time. But we understand now that AI has agents and harnesses that are capable of doing a lot. And so now it's just one command. If you are using AI agents and have access to Claude Code or Codex or anything else, you can go to LVT Shift GitHub and type in /LVT-City Cincinnati or anything of the sort, and you will get access to a full range. You'll get these final reporting out of charts, nice looking graphics that will do the LVT shift modeling for you, and you can refine the policy as you want. So there's actually a few different skills. You can first analyze the legality in the city. What does the city currently have access to? Can we do a universal building exemption? Can we do a split rate? What are our options here? And then you can model a city once you model a city, you need to understand how the AI did the modeling. It's really important to check the AI's work. And so you can have the AI explain the model to you. And once you have the explanation of the model, and once you model the city and see the outputs, you can start toying with the model and refining the model. And so if you want to check out LVT Shift, this is just one of many things that we are up to at the Center for Land Economics. There's probably a lot more to come in terms of AI usage, in terms of OpenAVM Kit, if you've been tracking Lars's work on that, and valuation models for property and land itself. This is just one of the tools that we wanted to release. There will be a progress in poverty post coming out soon about that. And so if you're interested in kickstarting your LVT advocacy or already have things going on, please, please, please reach out to Steve and I. We are more than happy to involve with anyone, and get moving and figure out how we can help you do the homework for your city electeds. And so if you have not already been in contact with us, feel free to fill out the form at landeconomics.org/form. And then watch out for our next LVT Landscape Live. And in the meantime, please follow us on our blogs. ProgressandPovertyInstitute.org releases weekly newsletters, so follow their newsletter there. And then progressandpoverty.substack.org. Please also subscribe there for updates. You will see, for instance, the launch of this LVT Shift tool, but you'll also see pieces coming out next week that'll be interesting, as well as the recording for this very webinar and the transcript for this webinar there. So with that being said, Steve, I will kick it over to you to see if there are any pressing questions from the chat, which I have not been able to monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just re-encourage our guests or attendees to send any questions that you have for the speakers into the chat. Greg, I think the two main ones that remained unanswered, I think might be better answered by us, but we'll see. The first one was from Raghav Srivastava, who's asking about, Prop 13 in California severely limits the possibility of LVT. And he's asking about, what are some of the workaround ways that we could achieve an LVT in California, similar to what we're sort of trying to do in Illinois with Cook County's restrictions. So I have some thoughts, Greg, but I thought you might like to weigh in first.
Yeah, the Center for Land Economics is also releasing a report on California soon, related to the wealth tax debate and land as wealth that's easier to tax. Land, can't move, and framing some of this in terms of Prop 13. Now, Prop 13 is a real hindrance on this. Admittedly, I think you just have to get rid of Prop 13. There have been efforts, right? There have been efforts to get rid of Prop 13 for commercial businesses, which is quite interesting if you think about it, because what that would mean is commercial businesses then get assessed at normal market value, while residential continues to get assessed at like 1970s values. So commercial would then pay like 4x more in property taxes. But what's interesting is that proposal does not include vacant land. And so if there's going to be another proposal like that on the ballot, I know Tom Steyer was running on this, although his primary results aren't looking great. He wanted to add commercial. We're trying to, say, if you're going to add commercial, at least also add vacant land, because vacant land also benefits significantly from Prop 13. And so you can see an increase there. Now, there's obviously vacant building fees and vacant land fees that you could do, but those are just some of my thoughts. Really, I think the political pressure is going to continue to build on Prop 13, or I'm hopeful that it does.
And
Steve,
then I'm going to use my answer on California to pitch Mary Beth's question to, I think maybe to Lyle, but the other guests are welcome to weigh in as well. So Mary Beth's question is, when you're working on implementation on LVT and you've got to be flexible with it, what are some of the non-negotiables? So this is kind of the question is, how far are you willing to stray from LVT in order to get a win on the board? So, with relation to California, I think, some of the second best options that are, they're not as efficient as an LVT, but they achieve some of the same goals. I think that raising the stamp duty, a lot of the economic effects of that are fairly similar to an LVT in terms of full capitalization, not discouraging productive activity, and so on. And likewise for the capital gains tax, capital gains mostly tend to come from land value anyway. So by kind of lowering the exclusion and raising the rate, you can also be effectively capturing a lot of land value without some of the pernicious effects of other taxes. And so then to float that question to, those guys who are kind of working on the ground in their local states, Jackson, you might want to weigh in as well. What are some of your thoughts about some of the carve-outs or the exclusions that you might be willing to accept, and what are the boundaries of what you would and wouldn't?
Sure. I've been talking with California friends about this quite a bit. Uh, they like stamp duty. The equivalent here in the United States would be real estate transfer tax. It's a workaround. It's not perfect. It's not LVT, but it can get you in the neighborhood. In Charlottesville, we focused on tax relief because it was legal, not perfect. I also pushed hard for tax increment financing, which is also not legal in Virginia. Um, our friends in Arlington did it by sort of some very careful and complicated paperwork and a lot of hopes and dreams. Um, that for me, that gets you as close as you can. But yeah, LVT is the thing.
And Jackson, I think you're
Yeah. For me, I'm focusing more on like actual real estate taxes, so not some of these auxiliary duties that can emulate the effects. But when I'm thinking about designing a real estate property tax that will provide the benefits of LVT, I'm thinking of just, land value capture. Like, is the duty actually taking land that is generated or value that is generated from creating a new structure to the other properties around it, and that can mean a good amount of things, but generally it's about raising the land. But more importantly, I'm thinking about the actual location of the tax, right? So, like, is it actually where land value is important, or are we trying to create a land value tax in a part of the state that is not very the constraint is not land speculation because people aren't bidding on the land out there, right? So that's why personally I was comfortable with doing a very targeted property land value tax here in my home city, even if I would have preferred a full countywide version. So.
great. And I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. I'm actually going to ask and then answer the question from Prof. Pang in the comments, which was about, can a progressive property tax rate help to incentivize affordable housing, such as are used in Singapore? So just to give a quick summary of that, Singapore has, what happens is for owner occupiers or for all property owners, you pay a tax on the annual value of your property. So it's not the assessed capital value of it. It's essentially like the rental value of the home that you own. And those tax rates are they increase, with the value of the property. So it's a progressive, essentially a progressive property tax, going up to, as high as 32%, even on owner-occupied properties, 32% of the rental value of the property. So the answer, yes, very clearly, this can help to incentivize affordable housing. And the America version of this is this paper that I'm about to post by, Arpit Gupta and some co-authors, is kind of filtering out into the discourse at the moment, where they essentially show, and this probably isn't surprising to anyone here, but places with higher property taxes tend to have more affordable housing, not less affordable. And this is really, contra to what you'll hear in a lot of local politics, which is like, oh, we've got to cut property taxes to help with affordability. No, it's the other way around. And this is because, higher property taxes capitalize out of the value of the land. So effectively, you lower the purchase price, you're exchanging a high upfront price and a low ongoing ownership cost for the opposite of that, which can actually help people into home ownership. And so this is kind of getting out there into the discourse right now, and I actually think it's very helpful for explaining to people the way that, land value tax is actually a housing affordability tool, not just via, enabling and encouraging more housing construction, but by also lowering some of the upfront costs of acquiring property. And Greg,
And
you the
and
questions?
that answer goes to Mike's question as well, which is when you abolish real estate taxes, you raise the selling price of land. So the value of land attributable to the private individual, that value increases. It doesn't necessarily increase the sort of raw value of the land. You increase the upfront selling price of land when you abolish property taxes. And this is why we have seen some young Republicans come out against. I mean, the Charlie Kirk show, for instance, has been really mad at DeSantis for his efforts on abolishing property taxes because they understand this as a massive wealth transfer from the millennials to the boomers. And so it's sort of just escalating wealth dynamics that are already playing out. And so I think that even within the Republican Party, you're seeing massive splits over this issue, which Lars has covered before on the Party Substack, which I encourage you all to check out. And then, Alana, I wanted to about your question on urging the city to lease out land. Every year, the cities and states own a ton of land, and they own a lot of underdeveloped land themselves. There's also a lot of land that is sort of just sitting vacant that cities can acquire if they have proper foreclosure processes. And then rather than reprivatizing, I think that there's a lot to be done on government land leasing, and governments being better shepherds of the land that they own, and making sure that it's developed upon, developed for uses that the government wants, while still maintaining ownership of it through 30, 50, 99-year leases. I think Singapore, for instance, is a good model of ways to do that, but I think that there are other models, including in the United States, including in Manhattan, of doing just that. And it looks like with that said, we are now 5 minutes over. And so, Steve, if it's good with you, I think that we can close out here. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for coming. This will be recorded and posted. To thank our panelists. This is quite a strong panel, as you all probably saw, of people who are really doing incredible work with incredible results on the ground. And so very exciting times. And we hope that the next LVT Landscape Live continues to have this type of momentum behind.